Well, welcome everyone. This is the 29th and final webinar of 2020. We've had close to 2,000 people attend webinars over the last year, and I won't say we've saved the best one for last, but I'd say we saved the best one for last. This particular session is on commissioning, completions, and startup, and I think it's got some great nuggets that you'll be able to take away. I don't want to take up too much time, but if you have not already joined the community of practice, we are rapidly approaching 1,600, and we've got some great programming lined up for next year. The best way to know about that programming is to join the community of practice. And I strongly recommend, if you have peers that you think would benefit from this, please have them join as well. Finally, when you're in the AWP Community of Practice website, you can invite connections to join the group. And I think that's a great thing to do. It's getting close to Christmas. That could be part of your gift to people. So let's now move on, and we're going to take a look at the presentation, and then we're going to follow it with Q&A, and we've got the whole team here. So I think this would be a great opportunity to get your questions answered. So Steve, let her rip.
To ensure the successful integration of AWP in support of commissioning and startup, or CSU, objectives, it is crucial to recognize CSU's influences on the project path and to align construction to support CSU. This session offers practical recommendations on how to establish and integrate CSU priorities and sequences early in the project, and avoid disconnected or standalone efforts for CSU. By integrating AWP with the real end in mind, your AWP project will capture the opportunity savings it previously would have lost. Here to present, please welcome Matt Provenzano, Luigi Anselmi, John Fish, Rick Dunlap, and Nick Dartnall.
I'm John Fish, Director of Project Support Services for Ford Bacon and Davis in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As co-chair, I have the honor of introducing the concepts developed by the CII Research Team 364 on the integration of commissioning and startup best practices into the AWP process. The objective today is to provide some examples of how others are using this research findings to improve their project outcomes. And the key word here is outcomes. Stealing from Stephen Covey, every project should begin with the end in mind. The end is not construction, but sustained production. That's the real outcome for the owner. As this slide states, CSU priorities and business objectives must be defined and clearly understood. Then and only then should the team develop the path of construction to achieve the desired outcomes. Now, there's a warning for owners here. Failure to include the commissioning and startup priorities in the planning of the path of construction will result in missed opportunities as high as several $1 million per day of lost or delayed production. The team developed a series of deliverables. We've referred to that as the CSU AWP toolbox, and we'll take a closer look at each one of these now. We inserted the word commissioning into the early planning stage of the project, and that's really, really key. CSU activities must be defined prior to WBS, CWP boundaries, or path of construction. It's very critical. First and foremost, the owner is responsible to provide clear definition of the business objectives and the commissioning of priorities to the project team. The primary systems or streams should be clearly defined in early front-end planning, and that's good enough to establish the priorities. Then we will develop the path to achieve commissioning and startup. We took the AWP flowcharts and we actually added a dedicated swim lane strictly for CSU activities, showing when they need to occur and the interactions with the other aspects of the team. In addition, we took the each one of these activities and we developed a roles and responsibility matrix. Now, the one in the book is a sample chart, and it may be different depending on the size of your project and the contract language of who's doing what. But the bottom line is you need to define a role and responsibility for everything, for every CSU activity on that swim lane. In addition, we developed an implementation narrative for each one of the points and also included some lessons learned from the industry that'll help you overcome some of the potential or perceived barriers for the implementation of gaining these these outcomes. This is the attributed data list or data requirements to support an intelligent construction planning 3D model. This chart was developed prior to the CII data requirements research team that is reporting out now. Previous research indicated that contracts were not requiring engineering companies to provide model attributes that were essential to support the conversion from planning of the CWP or area construction to system completions. These attributes must be defined and put into the engineering contract to ensure compliance. Every asset, and that's a line, a piece of equipment with a tag, a tie-in, etc., must be assigned a CWA, a CWP, and an operating system. This needs to occur early in the front-end planning. Also, these attributes need to be defined early and put into the contract, or they will not happen. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Luigi, and he's going to explain to you the importance of assigning systems and subsystems. Luigi, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for listening and attending this presentation. My name is Luigi Anselmi, Head of Construction, Methodologies and Innovation at the Maire Tecnimont Group of Companies. And today we will talk about, yes, systems as system, but bearing in mind the completion at the very beginning of the project, and not waiting till the very late time, approaching the end of construction. So we are talking about planning. Planning means now through AWP to facilitate the transition from area-wise progress to system-oriented completion through installation work package and eventually through startup work packages. So definition of the system as a system is essential for switching construction schedule from project to project breakdown structure, therefore AWP area-wise to system completion. That means startup work packages. And the key is to populate, to run, to have a repository that we call mechanical completion database, where we track all the information regarding system and subsystem, listing whatever shall be handed over to owner, including foundation, structural steel, whatever is also not included into the PNIDs, but are part of the scope of work of the project. And system as a system can exist if those are associated with tags. Therefore, those codes that identify each component subject to a control cycle. And here we go. So from the 3D model, we define the WBS, construction work area, construction work packages, installation work package. We can define everything. And therefore, we associate the components to each of these level of the breakdown structure. But these components are called tags. And each tag, again, will have properties, attributes defining physically where the tag is located, when the tag shall be worked out through the installation work package, but at the same time associated to the system and subsystem, and therefore defining the startup work packages. So everything shall be loaded into a repository that we call the mechanical completion database, where we can sort out through pivot tables the information first to pull out and work out a construction program based on WBS or area-wise, but at the same time switching and pivoting the data to have a construction schedule modified into the commissioning schedule, therefore listing the completion of the system subsystem through the startup work packages. So we abandon the idea, the typical idea of switching into system completion at 60% progress. With AWP is no longer needed. With AWP, we can immediately, at any point in time, switching the construction schedule into the commissioning schedule and completion schedule. So theoretically, it is really recommended to have the startup work packages defined 2 months ahead before their execution. And we will see later on in a slide that will give you the perspective from 2 points of view, commissioning and construction. Let's talk about systems. As John said at the very beginning, so breaking down the plant into functional system, process system is essential because we can depict from this breakdown by system subsystem the priorities. Then priorities are then located into the commissioning execution plan, and therefore pulling all the deliverables needed for construction to accomplish the completion of the system. So that is the exercise that should be done at the very beginning and not waiting till the end of the project. The physical area by unit should be broken down by system, by commissioning people together with construction along the path of construction and later on along the path of commissioning. We said about the tag. Tag are essential. Tag is the minimum discrete physical item subject to a control process. Can be a static or rotating equipment, can be an isometric, can be a spool, can be anything that is subject to a control cycle, anything that is included into the construction work package and eventually startup work package. But the tag, through its own properties and reflecting to the model, will trigger side processes, not only advanced work packaging, but also material acquisition, construction progress, mechanical completion, punch list, material preservation, accounting sheet. So you can say that the tag through the advanced work package constitute the backbone of the project execution and therefore the completion. So the tag is the connector of all the process, and this can be shall be taken into account. And if you go into the CII SR 1901, we can see clearly the importance of the tag because it's repeated in all the data model described in that document. Here you go. This is an example of a mechanical completion database, but it is not a mechanical completion database. It's a repository of all information, and all planned tags are coded by system in a way that can be pulled out eventually into the startup work packages. Here we can see test pack associated with their own system and subsystem. And this is important to visualize the project from different perspectives and needs, of course. On the left side, you can see the commissioning perspective, the commissioning point of view, systems. On the right side, you can see what a construction manager sees. The construction still to be completed with the access to be prepared not only for construction but also for commissioning. So you have to think about how the relation of startup work packages with installation work packages are important. Just imagine the scaffolding, and we will see later on during this presentation. So Planning of the startup shall be done at the very beginning. Planning shall be then structured through codes called systems assistant and therefore populated by tag. I leave now the floor to Nick doing on more details about the transition phase. Please, Nick.
Thank you, Luigi. I've been working with and helping to grow AWP for over 20 years now. And even in those early years, trying to establish a smooth transition from contractor to owner with the end in mind. I'm excited that AWP now is offering solutions for that. Consider a production facility designed to produce 250,000 units a day and a profit margin of approximately $10 a unit. That's $2.5 million of lost revenue for every day the facility is not producing. The importance of getting the relationship of attributes and tags to their defined AWP stages early can have several significant benefits, but none quite as much as the potential revenue from production. The larger the production profit potential, the more significant it is to align the attributes and tags with the respective AWP stages at the onset of the project. Imagine how much extra profit in terms of effort can be paid for on your project for the profit dollars associated with production. What you see here in front of you on the diagram, from left to right, is the bulk phase of construction leading to a more focused construction during transfer of turnover systems custody, transitioning to operations group for startup and commissioning. This is a phased approach that will have all parties at one point working in each other's areas. The green area represents early commissioning that helps construction. The yellow represents the proving of turnover systems, and the red area is a potential negative effect on construction. It is very important to establish overall project priorities to ensure all key project goals are addressed, including those identified by startup and commissioning. Project priorities may include understanding the sequence of events that lead to an operational steady state, understanding the pivot from geographical construction to completion and onwards to startup and commissioning, and construction needs during the project can mean systems are energized for use, but not part of the operational priorities. For example, energizing a fire water main to provide protection during construction increases safety and may reduce insurance costs during the remainder of the build. Another example would be to provide area power that can be utilized by construction. Not understanding the transition causes situations like energizing or introduction of hydrocarbons earlier than planned, significantly changes the progress of surrounding work, permit restrictions, preservation costs, and significant third-party duplications, i.e. scaffolding. The Data Management Hub contains the definition of boundaries for several phases of AWP, a common theme here in this year's AWP conference. As we saw in Luigi's presentation, the data can be used to view progress and all the AWP aspects visually through the eyes of the user, depending on what stage of the project you are dealing with. Think of it as a window into the life of a tag. One thing to note here is that the relationship of attributes changes to that of one to many for startup and commissioning boundaries, since it's quite possible to use an attribute or tag several times in different scenarios required to commission and start up the plant. In all other cases, an attribute or tag will only show up in one of the respective AW packages unless transferred. Each of the relationships need only be used for the required step you during AWP, but must be allocated so the ability to sort and visualize and therefore assign priorities to workload can be seamless. Establishing overall project priorities ensures that the path of construction has all the key project goals addressed, including those identified by startup and commissioning. The path of construction is the key timing to assign attributes or tags to multiple aspects for AWP, and therefore the predefined boundaries must be available prior to the path of construction. For example, the P&IDs. If we assign attributes and tags to the startup packages, we can identify and prioritize the construction sequence. And if we know the priority of the construction completion systems, we can track the geographical progress during bulk construction and at the right time convert IWPs to concentrate on tasks to meet the system's completion goals. The gray area often comes with pre-commissioning activities and who is responsible to perform the duties. Pre-commissioning costs can run anywhere from 9 to 15% of the TIC, but the clarity of who does what is often absent or ambiguous in major contracts. Where custody transfer from constructor to the operations group occurs, the activities are easily divided between the respective parties and therefore added at the appropriate time to either the startup package or an IWP as work to be completed. In some cases, a third-party group is assigned the preparation and turnover systems and facilitates the transfer of the components to the startup group. It is very important to identify these responsibilities so that the correct tasks can be assigned to the appropriate AWP packages. The activity and responsibility matrix is one tool that can assist by giving clarity of what tasks go into the respective AWP packages. It clearly defines what each party is responsible for. When responsibilities are assigned, quality documentation can be assigned a relationship back to the attribute or tag in the data management hub. Consider if hydrotesting is assigned to construction, the activity approved by its QA document would trigger one of the key steps towards completion and advance the visual in the data hub. In short, we must define in the contract the responsibilities so that the project is able to schedule the events to maximize the project goals. And finally, by feeding the record of the task completion, not the actual QA document, back to the data management hub, we can visualize progress and trigger the pivot from geographical construction to completion systems and onwards to startup packages. In the past, QA documentation assigned to the task has been barcoded so that when it is scanned into the system, it triggers the event in the data hub as complete. I caution here that not to make the relationship so rigid that construction can only perform the task as noted. For example, a hydrotest could easily be combined with several others and also could easily be split into several smaller tests. So the documentation that verifies the task must be able to be split into subsets as well as one document representing several tags. Once the data is available into the data hub, it can be used as a planning tool for third-party contractors to ensure alignment. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Rick, who will be talking about AWP Access Plan for Scaffold Use. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Nick. I'm Rick Dunlap, the VP of Technical Services for Brand Safeway. My team performs a variety of functions, one of which is one of our charter items is to drive AWP and workplace planning process into our field team. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So one of the reasons our organization really likes the AWP WFP framework is that traditionally in the blue, you'll see most of our work activity is dictated by a commercial strategy or process. When we get to participate in an AWP framework, we get the opportunity to not just be engaged at the construction management piece, but we actually get the opportunity to become engaged earlier in the project, help with strategy and constructability efforts around access, help develop access strategy in a very proactive environment. And then obviously we get to facilitate the work phase planning. I think one of the things that's really important for people to recognize, not just after a project's done and why scaffold cost or access hours are so high, but it's to recognize that earlier. And if you think about it, access hours may be 10, 20, 30% of a project, but we actually impact the majority of the craft hours on a project site. And if we can design things in a strategic way, we can start to improve the actual access users' productivity as well as reduce access hours and access costs. So it's sort of 2 for 1. Okay, so continuing with another perspective on the AWP framework, just to illustrate sort of in the traditional model where we typically get involved. It's really in the work phase planning element, which really limits our ability to help set access strategy and really sort of traps us to work on a one-to-one relationship or per IWP or act as how to alleviate constraints. So what we really want to do is sort of change that dynamic. So if you look at the traditional AWP framework for mechanical crafts, this makes a lot of sense. It's very straightforward. As an access provider, where we're actually facilitating each individual IWP through constraints, we're making sure they have access to do work. We can still add some value, and that value is added quite simply in saying, what is the scope? What does your IWP look like? What are the variables associated with your scope? And we design the best fit for purpose access we can. That still eliminates some modifications and potentially some rebuilds. It becomes very challenging for us, though, without that strategic view at the CWP level to find an opportunity to maybe share that same scaffold or access with others. So one of the things we really want to do is become more engaged at the strategic or CWP level, because today we're still managing IWPs one-to-one. So just one last illustration on what that really means is each individual IWP will generate an individual access need. And then it becomes incumbent upon someone on the access team to try and discern if there are some potential other users of that same access. Where if we were able to actually participate in the CWP level and we could be facilitated by the project team, we could start to connect those logical IWPs together and start to operate in a mini scopes to one access area sort of environment. That adds a huge amount of opportunity for your projects. So to better illustrate it, there's really a couple of perspectives that we can look at. One is the disciplines themselves, but in the AWP framework, we can look at the actual packages. So today we're operating one-to-one IWP. So in this case, a welding contractor or a pipe contractor may look at his IWPs and request access for each individual weld along this long 700-800 foot pipe rack. These really result in good access perhaps for that craft, but then what happens is the duplicated craft behind them, electrical, insulation, inspection, what instrumentation, whoever it may come along and have to start to duplicate that. So this one-to-one scenario really makes it difficult to keep your cost aligned and your hours and schedule aligned with what was in your project proposal and budget. So if we can eliminate these rebuilds or duplicated builds along with all the modifications, we can start to save real money for the project. So the preferred way is for us to basically participate earlier, understand all the scopes at the CWP level, and start to identify where many IWPs will be performed in the same area or the same location. We can start to design access for many IWPs to one access. Oops, skip that. So again, just to kind of hammer this home, it's a little more strategic view in front of the IWP, gives us lots of opportunity to stop the duplicated builds. And here's an illustration of what the duplicated builds, poor AWP process, poor work phase planning process may actually lead to. So I think going into a project, everyone's optimistic, everyone's in a hurry to get started. Sometimes the commercial strategy brings us in just in time, and someone in their bid scaffold and access hours at 10% DFL. So if we have a good commercial strategy and we have access treated as a discipline, we're helping drive strategy around those CWPs for, say, a pipe rack, a unit area, whatever it may be. We can start to drive consistent access process and stop all the one-off requests, stop all the one-off outside of strategic approach access and scaffolds. What some of the pain points for our customers? There we go. Some of the pain points for our customers would be they typically have a nested contractor. They may bring in an EPC. They may have multiple GCs, which drives this multiple contract environment, which makes it very difficult for someone who's providing service across all those contract models to actually do it effectively. What we end up with is multiple plans in that case, and those multiple plans end up with heavy duplicated builds and excessive rebuilds and excessive scaffold modifications. And if you think about the math, it's really pretty straightforward. You may have planned to spend 150,000 man hours on a 1.5 million man hour project. We've seen it range from that number actually all the way to 3 or 4 times as bad that. So a bad reality is what we're trying to avoid using the AWP framework. Thinking about the end in mind helps us avoid that. So my last slide is really sort of highlighting some of the enabling things that our clients, their prime contractors, others in the same contract ecosystem can help us do. Is let's stop managing many contracts and many plans. Let's figure out a contract methodology to allow your access provider to actually serve all the people on the project and how to deliver that project. And if we do that, we start to avoid those duplications that we talked about earlier. So I think there is a maturity curve to this. Having a contractor who understands work phase planning, can create work packages, can speak the language is of value. That value is limited until you really allow your contractor to be part of the strategic access engagement sort of environment where we can all agree as an ecosystem, this is in general how we're providing access for this area, this module, this pipe rack. And when we do that, we start to benefit in eliminating the duplications, planning for work as intended, reducing modifications. And when we have that, less chaos, less schedule and cost pressures, your providers, whether it's access or your others, can start to actually get very innovative and identify incremental items of value on your project. So it takes time. It takes a few tries, but if you're consistent and you facilitate, you can actually save money. We've done that for numerous clients that are part of this conference and others. So I appreciate it very much. That's my piece. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Rick. So what is a true end and what does it mean to begin with it? So you've heard from industry experts, and they don't get much better than John Fish and the rest of this team. They have done a wonderful job drawing a picture for us to show what and how we should be we bring CSU into early planning of projects. I'd like to add to their plea and incorporate how this approach affects the owner side and what we need help with. Yes, I said we and help. AWP is not something that can be done in a silo by an EPC, supplier, or owner. It has to be done together to get the value. As the owner, we need to bring all necessary parties together. It's our job to get the right people in the room to develop the plans and get alignment across the team. In order to do this, we need to incorporate the business drivers and also bring operations production in as well. We need to have the discussions early and frequent to drive the commissioning and startup. So how do we define it? It most likely means something different depending on your role and the seat at the table. And I certainly do not have all the answers, but can speak to what I've seen in the industry. I know we all have to do our part to extract value throughout the project lifecycle, which includes CSU, then run and maintaining the asset. For contractors or suppliers, the end could be mechanical completion, delivery of goods and services. But for an owner, the end is when the asset is in operation and is proven to perform for pre-identified business criteria such as production rates. We have to get everyone on the same level and define together as a team what the end is and what it means to the project team. It takes the owner to drive the alignment and get everyone together singing the same tune. To be able to successfully do this, there has to be representation from the business, operations, engineering, construction, and key suppliers, all of which have an impact to the project and CSU. The business teams need to understand the execution strategy and path of construction, understanding the construction efficiency that's being driven through AWP and how it aligns with preserving of the cash flow, and vice versa. The contractors need to be aligned with the business objectives and commissioning plan to fully support AWP in execution. So why? And why now? Why should we all be concerned with CSU? It's simple, it's cash. The project expenditure doesn't simply stop at mechanical completion. There's continued spend with operations, startup crews, utility suppliers, vendor reps, feedstock inventories, on and on. Without proper CSU strategies and alignment during the project development, there could be serious cash left on the table and the opportunity to realize project benefits could be eroded away by not being prepared. We have to take into account operational readiness and needs when developing our AWP strategies to ensure that we meet the intent of the business. These projects are there to grow the business or increase margin for the asset. The more we can do to ensure safe and stable startup, the better off we are, and there is potential for reinvestment. Reinvestment, then the cycle begins again, but we have to draw value to create the value. Let's think about a brownfield environment and a portfolio of small capital projects that are also part of a turnaround event. Operations is accustomed to working with systems inside their respective units, and a turnaround is generally aligned with those systems for decon, isolation, maintenance, and then startup. The project should be aligned with this as well, very early in the project process, as we talked about, to help identify the systems for integration into the turnaround and operational plans. And we ask ourselves, why do we have to focus on this now? It still all goes back to cash. We should always be aware of the cash pressures for projects and in the industry. Today's market, due to the impact of COVID-19 and lower demand, many facilities are pursuing cash preservation activities. We need to be smarter and more focused with our capital expenditures to extract value from the projects we execute. Some of the opportunities we have in a project team is to be aligned with expectations of operations. Now, how often do we find ourselves working on a system that operations may not need at the time? Do we know the progress status of various systems early enough to help drive business decisions? Do we find ourselves making late changes in commissioning and adding a valve or a bleeder to expedite commissioning activities? Or did we just tear down a scaffold that was needed for operations, or perhaps building a scaffold at the last minute to support CSU? Do we know early on how this project will go through commissioning and startup? These are all questions we need to be asking ourselves early in the project phases. So how does our contracting strategy support commissioning and startup? Do we have the right vendors in place? Do we have contracts in place early enough to have a positive impact? The graph to the right, most of you have most likely seen some variant of. Project influence and decisions have a higher positive impact earlier in the project. Our ability to influence costs drops off as a project proceeds through the various phases and stage gates. And as Rick said, scaffolding can be 20% of our project hours, but easily affect 80% or more of the work that we do. So do we incorporate our plan builds with operations in mind to allow them access to their work areas, not just for commissioning and startup of new equipment, but also in a brownfield setting? Are we creating obstacles for operations that could be avoided with better planning up front to understand the needs of day-to-day operations? So in closing, before I turn this over to Mr. Fish, what stands out to you when a project is completed? Just a quick look back, little story. I worked a project many, many years ago that by most measures would be considered very successful. We met our schedule, mechanical completion, and we finished with over 2.5 million man hours with 0 recordables. But the commissioning startup did not go as planned, causing undue delayed production of on-spec material. Years later, through networking and conferences such as this, and you start meeting folks and talking about past experiences, sometimes that project comes up, and even though it could be considered successful, what is often remembered is how we finished. So CSU has a long-lasting effect and can give the entire team a black eye, warranted or not. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Matt. See, I think Matt said it best. Even if we execute the engineering and construction well, the true measure is starting the plant into production and meeting the business objectives. It's one of those cases where the project was success, but the patient died. So we got to be careful about that. Failure to integrate the CSU priorities in the AWP execution plan will result in lost opportunity income for the owner. The CSU AWP integration is the best way to shorten that cycle time from project to production. So on a call to action, owners, you need to contractually commit to have somebody ready to identify those CSU priorities early in FEL for the contractors. Also, write your contract language that requires contractors to demonstrate the ability and how they're going to plan that conversion from area construction of CWA to prioritized system completion. So that pretty much covers our topic for today. I want to thank the team. I think you all did a great job, and I'm going to turn it over to Lloyd. Thanks, Lloyd.
Sorry about that. Just took me a second to get off mute. This is your opportunity to ask questions. We already have a number that have come in, but if you haven't asked your question, please take the opportunity to do that now. So let me share the first question. It's from Jason, and he's asking clients project management maturity in order to integrate different contractors to work in a defined area. What's your thought on that?
Lloyd, just Steve here. Could you repeat the question, please? Your volume is going up and down. It might be hard to hear. Or some others.
Sorry about that. Is this better?
Sounds good.
Oh. So, yes, the question that was asked was, clients need to have higher project management maturity in order to integrate different contractors to work in defined areas. What are your thoughts about that?
Thanks, Lloyd. Loud and clear.
So I think what they're getting at is how do we get the owners to increase their project management maturity in order to better manage the CSU process?
Well, I may answer, it's Luigi. I may answer to the question. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, the maturity can be, I mean, how to approach different contractors working in the same areas. Well, yes, it is together with the WBS or breakdown structure. Clients shall put together also an organizational breakdown structure, defining the interfaces, the roles and responsibilities, and where are the contacting point from different organizations. So to prepare an interface management plan, and that can be embedded into eventually into the WBS, into the scope of the work, and why not into AWP with proper definition of construction work area, construction work packages, and ultimately installation work packages.
Great. And anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah,
So,
this is
sure.
Matt,
Go ahead, Matt.
go ahead.
This is Matt Provenzano from Shell. So when I hear project maturity or project management maturity, I think there's really not a good answer that I can come up with, right? It's I think we all face the same thing, whether you're an owner or supplier, engineering contractor, construction, things like this AWP community, CII, ECC, other things in the industry where we can work to educate the folks that are within our group and to learn best practices and share those across the industry with our peers. I think is probably one of the better things that we can do right now to try and share what those best practices are.
Thanks for that.
Yes. Yeah, so Lloyd, this is Rick. I had just one little tag on it. I think to me, from my organization's perspective, since we're not the EPC or the GC, we're a provider for them. I think the most enabling thing that can happen is really the owners setting contract and commercial strategies that allow us not to optimize our individual contract, but to actually optimize the ecosystem to deliver the project as a group. So if we're managing our own schedules, that's definitely part of it. But if we're not held accountable to deliver systems when we need to, so that others can have their scopes, naturally occur in an optimized fashion, then we're sort of trying to mitigate project risk through a bunch of different commercial models, or if you like, I think we have to somehow be all tied together. The AWP framework helps us do that. The clients can help enable the commercial strategy and also help enable the project delivery ecosystem so that we're all dancing to the same song. That would make a big difference. And that takes a couple of tries, to be honest.
Thanks for that. We've got a question. Is it correct to say that AWP is defined by construction path and not by CSU path?
Well,
Can I take that one, Lloyd? This Fish.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that it's really what it amounts to is the customer has a business objective, and there's a reason why he needs to start up and have something be able to produce by a certain time. So I think when you're doing your path of construction, if you don't take that into consideration, you're headed down the road where you're going to have a very efficient construction, but you may very well miss the owner business objectives for building that project. So you've got to take the CSU objectives into when you're building that path of construction.
Great. Anyone else want to add to that?
Lloyd, if I can, it's Nick here. Yeah, John mentioned it there, but it really is, it boils down to this AWP is a construction industry drive to get the right things at the right place at the right time. There's more to it than just construction. And CSU is not the overall governing. Construction is not the overall governing. It's a combination of it as a project that says, this is what works for this team. That's what we need to put together as the path. Because if you start isolating and saying it's one or the other, we lose in your dollars and cents that Matt was talking about. We really have to bring this together. And I'm sorry, just going back to the last question. Procedures, integrating the procedures into how they do business as a tool for those project managers, so that they've got that to rely on as a key aspect.
Hey, Lloyd, I'd like to jump in on that a little bit too. I'm an LSU fan, and we got an LSU Alabama football game here a couple of weeks ago. And a young man by the name of Kaysen Boutte ran about a 70-yard run for a touchdown, and he actually let the ball go 1 yard before he crossed the goal line. Now, that could have very well been a disaster, but one of his teammates, Jonte Kirkland, saw it, picked the ball up, and carried it across the goal line. If an Alabama person would have got that, it would have been Alabama's ball, no touchdown. And by the way, Boutte did not get credit for the touchdown, even though he made the 80-yard run. It was Kirkland that got the credit for the touchdown. Now, the analogy here is that we use in our team is that's when a project, the project is successful, but you drop the ball just before the goal line. You got everything done, but you did not meet the business requirements, and you lost that dollar value of production on a daily basis.
Great point.
And that's why it needs to be part of the consideration.
Well, and we've got a slightly different question here, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Niam Kumur asks, there's lots of completion software programs out there, and specific companies like Total have come up with their approach. In which way is the AWP system better than all of these individual approaches?
Well,
So I'd like to take that one on if I can.
I can, yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. When you looked at Luigi's presentation, he had a slide there that showed the perspective of commissioning, the perspective of construction. And it really boils down to whoever's looking at it from what perspective. You need to be able to get out your piece. In order to be able to get out your piece, you need to feed the data in. And if you haven't fed the data in, you're not going to be able to view it from your perspective. So the software versus the other software, there's going to be a number of them that can do the same thing. But the ability to be able to get out of it what you're looking for is the key. And I think that was a very common thing in the whole AWP conference.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think one of the maturity model things, back to that question, is that early on, everybody thought it was all about the software. And now they're figuring out it's really more about the process and some of the data attributes that you include in your process to allow you to pivot and do those things when you really need to do those things. Software is just an enabler. Yeah.
Exactly. Software is just an enabler. We have experience on total software, total solution for managing the mechanical completion. And in essence, at the end of the day, the data is exactly the same. I mean, IWP may integrate and fit very well with the demand, the request or requirements of the total software, because the bottom line is always, the ground is always made by the data. The proper data definitions and data attributes enables any type of software solution, because it shall be defined at the very beginning the data model, and the procedures how the data shall flow from one system to another system. And basically the ground is exactly as shown, identifying the object, the component, the asset to be installed, to be checked, because that is the system, the total system, the way that the tag is checked and released. And of course, with the attributes of the system, subsystem, construction work area, so managing the installation work package at the same time managing the client or owner software. That is viable, and that is the only solution that we have to put in place.
Great. Any other thoughts? We've got another question here. What are the assurance steps, critical factors to ensure predictable project performance and delivery around CS&U?
Well, may answer the critical success factor is having bear in mind how to hand over the project at the very beginning of the project itself. So having in mind the delivering handovering strategy, and that the client shall fix at the very beginnings the rule how the plan should be handed over. So the system subsystem definition, the sequencing of the system and subsystem, the way that contractually should be handed over. So with a clear inspection and test plan and certification matrix attesting the works executed according to the sequence depicted for each subsystem or system. And then, of course, to have the clear roles and responsibilities settled into the contracts, as Rick said, not only looking at the convenience of a single subcontract or contract, but looking at the best way in handing over the project to the owner.
Yeah, and I add to that. Imagine you have a startup and commissioning system, and lo and behold, the pump that you need is not part of it because it's not ready. Making sure those what's required to do the work, and then planning for it and working backwards. You know, it's got to be given, it's got to be proven, it's got to be handed over, it's got to be installed, it's got to be designed. So it just works backwards, and making sure that that typical flow of information is attributed back to the right system so that it is delivered on time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in several other previous webinar, we were stressing the point from moving from pushing schedules to pulling schedules, exactly as Nick said. That is the critical, or let's put this way around, the success factor to have a flawless plant handover.
So that takes us to the end of our time. I just want to really thank the panel and put in a plug. The report that was issued is now available. It has some great recommendations. It has roadmaps. It has documentation there that we couldn't possibly cover in an hour. So I strongly recommend that you take a look at the report itself, because we've just scratched the surface today. Again, I want to thank everyone that called in, and I want to thank our presentation team. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Also, I'd like to suggest that we will have this presentation available on YouTube through a link that we'll be sending you. But also, do I have the permission of the team to share the presentation itself? Because I've had a request for that.
Matt,
you
do
Fish?
you have an issue?
Yeah,
No,
I'm comfortable.
I'm good.
Okay, good.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
So, Steve, we've had a request from Joel sorry, from Gason, but let's make the presentation available to everyone. Okay.
No problem.
Thanks to everyone, and have a Merry Christmas, and we'll talk to you all hopefully in the new year.
Thank you,
Okay.
Lloyd.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lloyd.
Lloyd.
Everybody. Okay, bye.
Bye now.